This episode of Field Notes is sponsored by Birmingham Fastener. Visit them at booth 145 at NESCC, the Steel Conference, to see how to reduce lead times for your fasteners and enter to win a Traeger grill. Welcome to Field Notes, the monthly podcast of modern steel construction, the monthly magazine of AISC. I'm your host, Jeff Weisenberger, and this month's guest is Kimberly Guzman, an associate engineer with Buehler in Los Angeles. She's also involved with AISC's Emerging Professionals panel, a group of early career AEC professionals from across the country, and we'll talk a little bit about that more in a few. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, Kimberly. And as I always like to say, I like to start from the beginning when I chat with people. So let's do that. Where are you from and where did you grow up?
I was originally born in Mexico, right across the border in Tijuana, and I spent most of my childhood there. But then we eventually moved over to the U.S. when I was in elementary school, and we settled down in San Diego, and specifically the city San Isidro, which is right across the border of that city. And so I always considered myself having grown up in Tijuana, even though we lived in the U.S., just because when we came over, most of the time I spent in the U.S. was just to go to school, so weekdays. And then after that, on my weekends and summers, I would be in Mexico at my grandma's house. So I don't know, kind of grew up in both places, but Tijuana really is where my heart is. Sure.
But it's interesting. You grew up in two countries, but both, obviously the spot in each of those countries are pretty close to each other, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So speaking of college, where did you go to college? And I'm curious, did you get set right on engineering right away, or did it take you a little while to get there?
Yeah, so I think my story is also very long, but I went to Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. Mm-hmm. So there's multiple Cal Polys, but the one is slow. I definitely did not start on an engineering track when I first got there. So when I first was applying to colleges, I was actually at my school. They have this thing called the medical pathway that is designed to connect students to local universities, so like FCSU and UCSD were my local universities, to the medical field. So I was already set to be like a doctor and get a biology degree. I was even trying to get my medical assistant license when I was in high school. And I got accepted to go to UCSD on a full ride.
Wow.
But one of my counselors ended up telling me, hey, like, you're really good at math. Why don't you try applying to this one school for this one subject and like just see if you get in? And I had no idea what architecture was. That's what I applied to Cal Poly as.
Okay.
And so I ended up getting in, and I don't know, something in me told me like, the medical path is just not for me. Sure. And I ended up just accepting and going to Cal Poly. So that's how I got there. And I started as architecture, so not engineering. While I was there, my time there was a bit of a struggle, I would say. Not that I struggled with the subject or with my classes, but just because I'm from a low income and things like that, things would just get in the way. So I ended up switching to architectural engineering, which is basically structural engineering over there. That's just what they call it. Mm-hmm. Because I was just really, really good at my structural classes. And so I was like, well, I'm good at math. I'm good at these classes. Let's just try that out. And everybody was always like, oh, no, structural engineering is very hard. Like, you should think about that. And I did struggle a bit when I first made the switch. But that's how I ended up being in engineering.
Wow. Yeah, that is quite the roundabout path to get there. But I suppose being a doctor would be hard as well. So
yeah.
You were destined to find something
easier.
Right. You were destined to go into a challenging profession, which is not necessarily a bad thing. That brings up the case though. So, a lot of times I'll talk to people who've been in this industry and they've talked about wanting to do it in some form or fashion for years. But and a lot of people say, oh, there was a building, when I was young that kind of that always got me interested in buildings. But since you came into that into the world of construction or architecture and engineering later, are there right off the bat, were there certain structures that you sort of adhered to, or you're like, oh, now that one's super inspiring to me?
Yeah. So I don't think there's a specific structure, just because when I first came into this industry, I had no idea what structural engineering even was. What structures were like, I knew buildings, but I didn't know that they were called structures, I was still learning all the definitions behind all of that. And to be quite honest, just being from like a first generation, no one in my family is part of the AEC community. So nobody ever talked about things like that. And as I mentioned, like my counselor was the one that kind of introduced me to this. And from being in the classes in architectural studios, they would talk about buildings. And that's kind of how I found my passion. But my actual passion for buildings after learning about them was looking back on my background and seeing how, at least my community in Tijuana, a lot of the buildings are in very poor conditions and like falling apart, or they're not complete. Or some of the houses are even just built by the families themselves and the people themselves. So that's kind of what motivated me to stay in structures and to at some point get to the point where I can have my company and then give back to those communities, or at least enter a company that does give back and help people like that don't have the resources that they need to build safe structures. That's kind of what motivated me and inspired me. So there's no specific structure. It's just like the ugly structures, I guess.
Oh, sure. No, I gotcha. Yeah, no, I guess maybe a better way of asking is like after you sort of got into, I mean, that what you're telling me, that's a really cool connection to buildings in general, but just like after, being pushed into architecture and studying it and looking at, and then studying engineering, I wasn't sure if there's like certain ones that you drive by nowadays where like, oh, now that I've got this background in this field, that's one of my favorites. But yeah.
Yeah, I'd say I have a lot of favorites, but none that are like around here. I'm usually attracted to museums. So like the Broad is right like 2 streets away from where I live and from where I work. And that building is pretty nice. The exterior has like a really nice facade. So when I was in architecture too, I was always attracted to like those crazy buildings, but there's only so many of those.
Right. Okay. Well, speaking of memorable projects, I mean, let's talk about what you've worked on. Have you, I mean, just like maybe, can you tell me what one of your more memorable projects is? Ideally a steel one, in terms of like, you're really proud of that one, or that one really drove, or maybe one that drove you crazy. And I know I've noticed a lot of times when I talk to people, sometimes the one that they're most proud of is also one that drove them the craziest.
Yeah, so I'm still pretty early on my career. So I've touched a little bit of steel, and actually I'm currently working on 2 steel projects, but they're not fully in construction. One is a courthouse, and then the other one's a museum. So
oh, perfect. There you go.
The museum I think will end up being my most memorable. It's also a pretty complicated building, so I would say it's also the one that will bring me the most headaches. But yeah, that one is they has like some curved elements, and like we're using HSS columns that are round to become kind of both the column and the beam to have a wave-like setting. So it's actually going to be a museum in San Diego, right across like the Bay area.
Okay.
So it'll be near the ocean, and so the architect kind of got their inspiration from the waves, and that's kind of how the building is set. But yeah, that project has been pretty memorable. One, because it's from where I grew up, so I can actually tell my mom, hey, like go see this building. I helped like make this happen. And then 2, because it's a museum, and I'm obsessed with museums, so it'd be great to say, hey, I like contributed to building a museum. And then also because it's just very complicated and it's testing my skills up. A huge reason why I wanted it was because I really wanted to test what I can do in steel and learn more about it, go outside the code and see like what do people do when it's not just prescriptive, like it's not just a square building. But yeah, that's the building that I'd say is the most memorable as of now, and I think it will end up being the most memorable ever. Right.
Well, that's like you said, you're young in your career, so that's a fun perspective to say, okay, I've got this really cool project that I'm working on, and and you're probably right. Like you could be doing this for 50 years or so, and then you'll probably I'm sure you're going to have a lot of memorable projects, but this one, you're right, for all those reasons, yeah, you can, we will check back in a few decades and say, is that one still? And you'll probably, and my guess is it'll still be up there in your top five or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we've already had some struggles with it, with just like talking to the architect about how you want to detail some things and like where certain columns, like they obviously, a museum wants to be open floor and it can't always be that way. Right. So we've already had a lot of like conversations back and forth and trying to move past. We're barely in design phase and they're already talking about like some things that we would do in construction. So it's already been a little bit of a headache, but I'm enjoying the process of it.
I want to ask a little bit about some of your initiatives that are related to work. So I understand you're involved with SEAOSC, so Structural Engineering Association of Southern California, and then the Structural Engineering Association of California. And you are involved with the local SE3 committee, as well as involved with leadership for the SE Pathways program. Let me know if I got that right, and can you tell me a little bit about what the SE3 committee is, and then the SE Pathways program is? Yeah,
so I'll tell you how to pronounce them. So we usually call them CIOSC and CIOC, so that's how I'll refer to them. Yep. It's a lot easier to say than saying the whole thing. But
I was trying to be formal.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. So I'll start with SE3. SE3 stands for Structural Engineering Engagement and Equity, and their mission is to raise awareness to promote dialogue around the issues that the profession is having. And some of the initiatives that they work towards is developing professionals, diversity inclusion programs, and improving project management skills. So my journey there kind of started because I was part of the diversity and inclusion committee first. Which I was just a member at the beginning and then ended up becoming chair after being in it for like a year. And when I became chair, I actually had discussed with the CIOS board and my committee members about changing and rebranding to an SE3 committee. Because I just figured with all the things that SE3 does, it would be great to just have a local group connect to the broader community and just share resources. And I just saw how SEONC, which is the SEA in Northern California, and NCSA, they've been doing a lot of good things and a lot of progress with what they do. So I kind of wanted to bring that here into Southern California and try to have some of those initiatives happen here, just because I feel it's been kind of a slow progress for us down here. But yeah, so that's what my hopes are for being SE3 chair right now. Is just to try to bring more awareness to it and have more diversity initiatives without having, I don't know, sometimes the word diversity gets different meanings behind it. So I thought changing to SE3, it's just like more impactful. And it already has some like traction in other places. So that's my involvement with SE3. So it's still starting. We just changed, I think, a couple months ago. So SE Pathways Committee was formed in response to the 2020 CIOC call to action. So if you aren't familiar with the call to action, it kind of focuses on supporting underrepresented students in structural engineering and addressing the systemic barriers that limit their success. So the committee offers a program to help increase diversity, retention, and leadership in our profession, with an emphasis on underrepresented groups. So I first got involved with it because I was part of the 2023 cohort. And with being part of the cohort, my experience there kind of changed my career completely. It transformed it in ways that I had no idea. I was really close to leaving the profession, and I think had I not been part of that program, I would not be where I am. So now as vice chair, my goal is to raise awareness of the program so more people like me that are struggling like have the opportunity to meet more people, get involved with their community, and find support, and know that there is people, like our community is there to help you succeed. Like we all want everyone to succeed, and for more engineers to enter our industry, and more diverse engineers too, not just any engineer. So that's kind of my goals for those two committees. I'm very passionate about diversity and inclusivity and just because of my background, I struggled a lot, and I just want to be able to give back and help anybody that did go through the barriers that I went to not have to go through them. And if they do, not alone.
Sure. No, those both sound like a couple of very worthwhile initiatives. And again, it sounds like you're very passionate about those, so that's good to hear. And then on kind of on a related note, you are involved with AISC's Emerging Professionals panel. Can you talk a little bit about your involvement there?
Yeah, so I was initially invited because I met someone, Hannah Valentine, who is my mentor now. And she kind of talked to me a little bit about what that was going to be, and an initiative that AISC was starting just to get a younger perspective on what they're doing and just get younger people involved with the different committees and task groups that they have. So I think we had a kickoff a couple months or last year in October, I think. And they kind of just introduced what AISC is, what AISC offers, because I think most people just know AISC from the Steel Manual, but apparently there's a lot more to it than that. And I had no idea. So being part of this group has been super eye-opening and just opening my eyes to all the resources that we have for steel. So this is also helping me with my project that I was mentioning about with the museum. But yeah, it's just trying to get more people across the country. We even had, it's not just engineers, they even had fabricators. And we learned a little bit about the fabrication process of steel and where those companies are that fabricate our steel. And then I think they want a fresher perspective from what a young engineer would need and what AIC can do better. So we're kind of just there to help, and I'm excited to see what we can do and what I can do as part of that group.
Excellent. It's good to hear. And kind of similarly, I suppose you're talking about kind of like a good exchange of ideas between you and AISC, or just younger professionals or emerging professionals. That just brings to mind the idea of advice. And I'm curious, is there, do you have some memorable advice that's, or maybe some of the best advice you in your opinion that's been given to you by, either from a professional standpoint or life in general?
Yeah, so I would say when I was part of the 2023 cohort of the SE Pathways, we went to a convention in Anaheim that I think it was the NCSEA Summit, Technical Summit. And they had a speaker there. And even though it wasn't direct advice, I still think that what she said was pretty impactful. It was regarding imposter syndrome. And how everyone, pretty much everyone experiences it at some point in their career. So at that point, like I said, I was struggling. And so I was experiencing a lot of that, and just hearing how the steps that she would take to try to focus on accomplishments and things that you're good at versus trying to look at the things that you need more work to do. I think that helped a lot, just because I kept focusing on all the negative. And you tend to, when you're going through something that's not great and you're stuck in this imposter syndrome. So she said something like, oh, whenever I get a certificate, I start a mental filing, and also on my phone, a filing thing, or when I get a compliment, I start writing them down. Sure. And when I'm feeling down, I pull those up and just see what other people think of me. Because obviously right now, when you're going through that, you think you're the worst person, that you're not good, or whatever, that you're the worst engineer, whatever it may be. And so pulling it back to see, okay, wait, all these people think I'm smart. All these people think I am doing good. All these people think that I'm doing a great job. So I think that has been the best advice. And I try to give that to young engineers too, if I see them struggling, or anybody at work, if they're I don't know how to do this. I'm oh, don't worry. No, not everybody knows how to do everything. And so, yeah, I think that has been the most impactful advice that I've gotten, because I don't think imposter syndrome is ever healed. You always kind of have it there, but you kind of manage it a little bit better if you try to focus on your achievements and accomplishments and what others think of you versus what you're thinking of yourself in the moment.
Sure. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I think imposter syndrome sort of ebbs and flows with a lot of people. But like you said, when you get validation from others and then keep that list of good accomplishments, and then you also, as you were saying, you realize that when you realize that so many other people kind of go through that, it normalizes it and makes you go, oh yeah, you know what? I'm not the outlier here. We're all kind of in that same boat at some point. I make the joke about it because I think I've gone through that too. And it's like, well, maybe I am an imposter, but my strategy is I'm just going to see if I can get to the end of my life without anybody ever figuring me out.
Yeah.
That's a joke. But no, it is good advice. And no, it's good for the professional world and life in general. So that's good to hear. And it's great to hear that you're passing that along too, because it's kind of like, hey, been there, done that. Yeah, so that's good.
Yeah, and I think as a younger professional, not a lot of people, everybody thinks, oh, I'm the only one, right. Because you haven't met a lot of people and yep. You haven't heard all those people tell you, yeah, I've also gone through this. So I think just making it, like you said, normalizing it and just having everyone know, like, you're not alone.
Right. And the other part of that is, like, I think everybody is, like, you touched on the idea that everybody's their own worst critic, and you might be your own worst critic like your entire life, but at least you gain that wisdom to realize that, like, you're like, wait, I'm being hard on myself, but of course I am, because that's how it goes. I want to switch gears just a little bit because, so you talked about, living in Tijuana, and then just near San Diego, and now you're in Los Angeles. So, in your time so far in LA, what do you enjoy most about it?
I think what I enjoy most is it being so central to a lot of things. I do like that you can get to a variety of different landscapes relatively close, with a relatively close distance. Like, I can go to the beach in just like a 30-minute drive, or if I want to go to the desert, it's like a 2-hour drive, even to like the national forest or things like that. So I like being out in nature and being so central. Even though I'm in the city and I love nature, I still can get to any nature like place that I want. Even if I want to go to the snow, like, it's still relatively close. It's only like 2-hour, 3-hour drive. So I like that about LA. And you also have a whole bunch of different things here. Like, you have museums, you have parks, you have, like, there's also amazing architecture here too. I won't say that there isn't. And all the nice houses too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely, you got access to a lot of things out there, which is really cool. And obviously it's a big city. So, anything you want food wise, it's pretty much there. Yeah.
Yeah, that too. Food is a big one.
Right. Oh, and on that note, because you were talking about San Diego, we're talking about like Tijuana. What's your opinion on fish tacos? I'm just curious.
On fish tacos? Oh, well, you have to go across the border for those.
Okay. I spent a lot of time in San Diego. They always
never the same.
Right. Good to know. Yeah. I've got family and I've had friends that lived out in San Diego, and so I just know it's sort of like part of it, things out there. But yeah,
I think San Diego gets the closest. Some people are like, oh no, here in LA, like, we're still pretty close, and I still have yet to find some really good ones. So
gotcha. Okay, I will keep this in mind next time out there. I'll be eating good ones, but I'll know that I can get better ones. So.
Sorry.
Oh no, that's good. Well, hey, no, that it's nice to know.
Now you'll have to go down and visit.
Right. When you eat something that you're really thrilled about, and then you're like, wait, there's an even better version. So, that gives me something to strive for. This has been Modern Steel Construction's Field Notes podcast. Our guest this time around has been Kimberly Guzman with Bueller out in Los Angeles. And as always, I'm your host, Jeff Weisenberger. Thanks for listening, everyone. Once again, this episode of Field Notes is sponsored by Birmingham Fastener.